How to include intercultural training, areas of difference. Culture can be analyzed using a number of different dimensions. We have selected 5 elements of interaction which speakers must consider how to handle during a conversation. The first is if and when silence is valued, what is appropriate in exchange, what is politeness, how to make requests, and what are the power differentials during an interaction. So the first one is silence golden. When do we know and how do we know when to speak and when to remain silent? In collectivist Asian culture, silence is favored and values, and Asians are known to be people who talk less. As opposed to this, Finns who are Europeans are also reputed for saying very little in conversations. Only when there is a need, then they would talk. As opposed to this, North Americans become very uncomfortable if there is a silence during their interaction, and they would even start off on inane topics in order to break the silence. They consider silence to be a failure of a rapport between the speakers, and they would do anything in order not to have a pause in the conversation. If we look at the society of Athabaskan Indians, we find that they value silence during interaction. For them, it is a way to guard their own as well as their own individuality as well as other people's individuality, basically because of the fear that if you talk to somebody, then you will be forced to change your opinion. So any conversation in this sense is threatening, because there is a possibility that your point of view would be negotiated and it would be changed. Whereas the Western in conversational styles, there is to check out your sense of reality, that is your point of view, is one of the conversational goals here. And part of this checking would mean disrespect of others' rights for Athabaskan Indians. So we can see here the difference between the two cultures. The Athabaskan Indians, they do not consider talking a lot because of the fear of changing their own point of view and others. Whereas in the Western cultures, they have to talk so as to check their own sense of reality. As Wider and Pratt point out, the real Indian must know that neither he nor the others has an obligation to speak, that silence on part of the conversants is permissible. In some societies, people don't talk unless they are introduced. So you might be sitting for a long time with somebody in a waiting room, or you might be in the same classroom with your classmates for say the whole semester, but unless somebody introduces you or the other person introduces himself or herself, you would not talk to that person. There are other instances where once the acquaintance is established, once the introduction is carried out, then it becomes an obligation to acknowledge the person and to stop whatever you're doing to talk to the person. Also, there are different cultural norms about initiating conversation. Who is going to start the conversation? So, at one end of the continuum of silence, we have got long pauses, which some cultures favor. And on the other end extreme of the continuum, we have loud talk, which almost seems like a competition to dominate the floor. So it seems to be as if the person in loud talking, a person is trying to assert himself or herself mainly through the sound of one's voice. There are some cultures in which turn taking doesn't exist, and if it does, then the individual breaks his turn and goes on to greet somebody or to talk to somebody else, and then come back to the conversation and resume his turn. So societies have different norms against interrupting a conversation. Some take it as an offense, but others take it as normal. Loud boasting, talking loudly and boasting is taken in some cultures as a show of strength, and it is also taken as a form of a defense against any potential attacks or criticism.